When you ask a child about abundance, they think about grocery stores, department stores. There's a disconnect from the ecosystems upon which we depend and the kids and cultures that depend upon them. So what are we doing here? We're endowing a process of learning with the landscape itself. The kids are put in charge of the goats and the cheese making. We don't tell them what to do, we ask them what to do, and that obliges them to think about the whole system, the landscape, the water, the air, closing the loop, the fertilizer that comes out of the back end of the goat, and the organic feed that goes in the front. And where does that come from? These are big questions. It's the system. So how do you introduce a child to a living system? Our approach is what we call curiosity-driven. What that basically means is you expose kids to a lot of possibilities. And instead of telling them to sit down and open the book, we say, hey, which of these subjects is really interesting? And we qualify opportunities for experience in the real world by inviting them to prepare themselves, literally prepare themselves for that experience by doing research and becoming expert in the area in which they have enthusiasm.
What does it look like to have a multi-pronged project, not just a dissemination model, but something that flows all kinds of experiences into this place where the, there are so many micro ecosystems represented. What has been in preserve, what has been in production, what are these ways to bring these interdisciplinary sets of knowledge and experiences into being.
Enthusiasm is a great word. From the Greek entheos, the God within.
So every day we woke up and came down for breakfast, and we were given a list of things that needed to get done, and then they were distributed between everybody, and everybody got to have a choice of what they were doing. So some people really like to paint, and some people like to get down in the dirt and get your hands dirty. Some people like to build. And everybody found their niche and kind of worked towards that. So if you like to do a little bit of all of it, you could try all of it and switch jobs and ask other people to trade with you, because often people want to experiment. And I think that's really great because a lot of people don't get to try all different kinds of work. We're forced into one specific thing or told we're supposed to do something, and then we just follow through. And so you get to try all sorts of different craftsmanship, which is really cool.
First of all, I just think a big thanks to Paul Allen in getting Hank moving forward in his conceptualization and actual realization of this idea of a learning watershed.
We like to encourage kids to think about good order. Where does world order begin? And the answer, at least one good answer, is that world order begins in the kitchen sink. It's also a good answer to the question, what can I do? What can I do? There's usually something in the kitchen sink to do.
Francine and I really connected, and I think we just egg each other on, and we really enjoy working together and brainstorming together. And in this one very seminal dishwashing one evening, really had this vision of how it could work. And one of the ideas that we're working towards is to really create like a teacher institute. So these teachers come to the reserve and spend time here and become essentially fellows here. And that would be one way really to approach it, logistically, that would be a way to approach the teacher education is actually creating these small institutes.
We've encouraged the kids who work here regularly to think about what does stewardship mean, and the one-word summary that seems to work is bettering. You manage something in a way that increases its productivity, its usefulness, its fertility, its abundance. Passing resources on increased in their ability to generate abundance and well-being. Not just for people, but for the whole ecosystem of consequences. A partnership with future generations.
Hank's story is quite unique and not just endearing, but of course he's macro micro at the same time, right? He's global and intergenerational finance and a global new economic model, and he's milking goats at the end of the day. So you don't meet very many people in your life who are really fluidly moving between these spaces.
I'm Rose Sandy, and I work at the Reynolds Learning Academy, which is in Fairview, Oregon. I run a program called the Multnomah Youth Cooperative. It is a small program where alternative high school students come and spend half of their time in the field engaging in stewardship work, environmental restoration work, and have an opportunity to learn through experience. So coming out to Hank's farm, I think, is really important for the kids in our program. A lot of them don't really leave their neighborhoods. They're in urban areas and they're not really connected with their food sources necessarily. A lot of them have never been exposed to farm animals or farming. So to get them out here, it piques curiosity. They're active, they're hands-on, they're getting exposure to food sources, to nature, and just really like getting information that you couldn't really get across to them in a traditional setting. Watching the transformation that happens within the group as a whole, like the team, the connection, it every year becomes like a family rather than just school or a class. The kids look forward to coming to school. They're accountable. They let me know if things are going on. So for me personally, not only is it great and very therapeutic to be out in the environment and be in touch with the elements and the plants and nature, but it's also really rewarding to see the amount of ownership the kids take over their education and their interests, and just the exposure that they get to new things that they didn't even know they were necessarily interested in.
When I see a place like this, I think, what a great opportunity for the kids in this area. What would that look like if the public schools were really engaged with this kind of landscape? And then can we create similar learningscapes for kids in other parts of, again, Washington, the Pacific Northwest, or the world, really?
I think it's really important to also realize that we're, in this cradle of wild forest all around us, and that this reserve really helps protect this space. And there are spotted owls here, and western gray squirrels, and there are, and we have pileated woodpeckers nesting right over here. It's a really wonderful wild place, and that's really important, that there are sites like this that protect that as well. But but then also in the middle of this wild space, we can have this successful, sustainable living of human community.
As a teacher, the things that excite me most about the opportunity to work with the Little White Salmon Biodiversity Reserve is to have a place that I can take my students to do meaningful work. We have a capstone course that has been approved and that will be offered in the near future through Portland State University that is going to bring a group of senior college students out onto the landscape to be a part of the learning that's happening there and to support the ongoing efforts to connect with the local schools as well as all the teacher colleges in the greater Pacific Northwest that are hungry for this kind of a landscape and place to go where true learning can happen at a system scale about how to create resilient human systems that are integrated and a part of the landscape, taking advantage of the extraordinary opportunities that this rich landscape affords, and at the same time investing in our future so that we are delivering goods and services to future generations. I've had the opportunity to visit the Little White Salmon Biodiversity Reserve a number of times. I enjoy the opportunity to engage with people who are exploring big ideas that are extraordinarily important for us to be thinking about if we're serious in regards to our commitment to this place. And what I see happening there is people that are committed to figuring out a better life for our shared future. And it's been extraordinarily rewarding for me to be a part of that and to experience the beauty of the place, the opportunity to engage with other species and learn more about this bioregion that I call home, and just engage with the landscape in a way that teaches me more about myself. That's been hugely fulfilling for me.
The cool thing about, I think, the location of the Learning Watershed is it's on the Columbia River. It's at the base or at the interruption of the Cascade Mountains by the Columbia Gorge. So you've got Washington and Oregon, you've got Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, Western Washington, Western Oregon, the central parts of the state. And so it's a really interesting place socially and economically and ecologically. So it's a beautiful place to kind of start this model.
How do we inoculate culture with a vision of sustaining stewardship? What represents a pathway to a kind of human civilization that can nurture and protect this uniquely beautiful, only known living planet in all of the cosmos, all of the places, in all of the light years. The only one that's alive is the one that we're running into the ground. So sustaining culture becomes, I think, a central theme of education, and you can't honestly, in my opinion, have a sustaining culture without wisdom. So where do you go to get that? So our thinking about that is to use nature and landscapes and the opportunity to have beautiful, rich, rewarding, exciting encounters with the miraculously powerful beauty of nature and its ability to be abundant in intimate and personal ways. And the way to the fuse to light that leads to that explosion of excited engagement is the curiosity of the human being, of the young child, but a child of all ages, because any learner is a child. The beginner's mind is a childlike state. And when we walk into that space with our eyes open and our curiosity excited, whatever we do is going to engage us at the deepest level, and we are going to be profoundly receptive to these important lessons that are presented to us by a honeybee, by a rosebud, by a seed that's root is going down and little green leaves are starting to open upward. Toward what? Toward the source of the energy, which is the sun around which our living planet revolves. And that's a system of abundance, and it contains birth, life, death, and out of that cycle of birth and life and death comes fertility. And our mistakes, our compost becomes the basis of our next experience of the unfolding of life. So endowing that process of encountering nature with a landscape that is protected for stewardship and learning is a profoundly critical function.
Like I feel like that's something that Hank like wants to bring out, like do things like that you want to do, like projects that you want to do, instead of having things like forced on you.
Our two enjoy coming up here and putting their work into things that they can see a result of. You know, they see the things growing, the animals being taken care of, the land, making use of the energy that they put into it and producing things that they can use, food, you know, drink. So.
And a space like this to support
in a space like this, I think that's truly inspiring. And there's something wonderful at that young age to find other people who are doing what you're doing, which is not the mainstream thing to be doing at this age.
So you do all those chores and you're doing all this work to support the farm, and then you come home and you eat dinner, and then when you think you're ready to go to bed, you go and feed goats, which is another thing. And it's actually really fun. You're feeding goats and then you go and milk them, which is tiring also. But it's all of these things, you get to see the progress in front of you. And so as tiring it is, and every time you go to bed you're exhausted on some level, you feel really accomplished because you can see your work in front of you. You can see the progress you've made throughout the day.